say farewell to the end of this reel.
You want to just write it so that, I mean, you don't want to milk it into some huge big thing.
No, of course.
I mean, I'd prefer you were to be honest about it.
No, that's what I'm
because there's nothing worse than, bullshit,
No,
what I
I
mean?
agree.
And then all it does is it means everybody else starts phoning up and then they want their version of it, I'm sorry, I mean, we're all going to die one day, but I'm not going to die for you quite yet.
You wouldn't want that.
Well, you never know. I think it makes a good story, doesn't it?
When it was first...
When he was first diagnosed with cancer, he told me, and in a way, as his main thing was not to upset me. I mean, there was a man who was not well, who was worrying about me and all the people around him. So that was the measure of the man. And then, of course, it was with great joy that he actually got better initially. And so things were back on track, and we all put it to the back of our minds that this was gone now.
I woke up, I just heard smashing of glass. I jumped up, I woke up George. It must have been about 4:30 in the morning. And I said, somebody's smashed a window. And he said, how do you know? I said, I heard it. So he jumped up, and I ran to the door and I locked the door. And he said, why are you locking the door? I said, why? Because I'm afraid. That's why I'm locking the door. He said, no. I'm going out there. And so he ran downstairs, which he really didn't have to do, but he felt he had to do because my mother was upstairs, and he didn't want, he didn't know if she was okay. We had a statue of St. Michael, and the wing from the statue of St. Michael was made of stone, had been thrown through the window. And George was on one side and I was on the other, and we looked down and this maniac just ran in like a Beelzebub with a stick from St. Michael in one hand. He slays the dragon with his spear. He had that in one hand, and I didn't see what he had in the other, but anyway, George started chanting really loud at him. And this guy was saying, get down here. What do you want? He said, you know what I want. It was just horrible. It was just like this voice from the bowels of hell. And then he just tore up the stairs. He was in a florid psychotic state, and he was tall and young. And they'd come closer to where the room was, and this man was on top of George, trying to kill him, just laying on him in just, I think, the worst way, to have some, physical contact with some horrible person. Anyway, I just ran back in the room, and I don't know, something just took over, and I grabbed a poker. My dad was a big baseball fan, and he used to always say, follow through. That's all I could think of was, don't throw like a girl. Follow through. I mean, it got worse. It just got worse, because I hit the guy several times. I could see the blood spreading down his blonde hair, and then he got up. He got up and he chased me and had me around the neck, and then George got up and jumped on his back. And poor George, he said, God, just when he got off of me, I was thinking, good. Then I had to get up and fight him again, and he'd already been stabbed. But we all fell into a big pile, and I managed to get out from underneath, and George pinned him down, and George said to me, I've got the knife. And I thought, what knife? I didn't know. I thought he was just kidding. I thought he was just trying to fake the guy out, saying, I've got the knife. It's like, I hadn't seen that. Afterwards, we were taken to a good old National Health Hospital with these rickety wheelchairs at 4 in the morning, and it was like freezing. It was so cold. I was just shaking. I didn't realize I was in shock, but you know, they were pushing us down, and we were looking at each other, and we got us in these beds, and they put the curtain around us, and he had a collapsed lung. He had things in and out the other side, in and outside of his leg. You know, I had my head open, and you know, but just looking into each other's eyes, just our eyes must have been like. I said, "What the hell was that?" He said, "I don't know. It's like I never tried to kill anybody before." And I said, "No, either did I." It's like, you know. But what, you know, obviously we talked about it a lot, and the next day George said, you know, I was lying there and I was thinking, I can't believe it, after everything that's happened to me, I'm going to be murdered. I'm being murdered in my own home. And since I'm being murdered and I'm going to die, I better start letting go of this life. And I better start doing what I've been practicing to do my whole life so that I can leave my body the way I want to. I was so defiant and so determined. Nothing was going to stop him from leaving his body and leaping as high as he could go.
It was the millennium, and we were staying in Santa Barbara with some friends, and then this awful news came through. I said to Tanya, we have to go. And so I called up and he said, do you know, should we come? And he said, where are you? So, okay, so we got on a plane and came immediately. And it was very, you know, it was very powerful. I mean, they would walk us around where the various stages of the attack took place. When they picked him up and they put him on this stretcher and they're carrying him downstairs. And there were two people who had just started work that weekend. And he's being carried out, stabbed, they'd stabbed him. He looks over and he says, so what do you think of the job so far? Which is a great kind of, very George.
So Danny and Livy and George came up to this house, and he just was so distraught. I've never ever had a time when there's so many tears have been shed of just total grief of no death, just grief of what a horrible thing somebody could do to another person without actually killing them.
He was very, very badly attacked, and by the time he died, he didn't even have a single scar on him. I mean, he was like a yogi. He moved on from that physically and mentally and didn't let it affect him. But it definitely took years off his life, you know. 'Cause if you're trying to fight cancer and then you're trying to stay alive for something like that, you know, it's got to take it out of you, you know.
We went to Fiji take us to the island where there isn't anybody, and then take us in a boat and drop us off at the cove where there isn't anyone, on the beach where there isn't anyone. And then he'd disappear. It's like he's only with me. And then he would go off on his own, but he'd come out like dressed in banana leaves or something, you know, with like heliconias and things. He liked to, for him, I think that was just like building a fort out of bracken.
I had experience which speeds up the whole idea of, you know, if you have something happen to you physically, then, you know, people can go in hospital or have something wrong with them and, you know, have a shock or something like that. And then you think, wow, yeah, I could be dying now. Now, if I was dying now, what would I think? What would I miss? If I had to leave my body, you know, in an hour's time, what is it that I would miss? And I think, well, I've got a son who needs a father, so I have to stick around for him as long as I can. But other than that, I can't think of much reason to be here.
We had this whole 30 years together, and then at the end, you're able to just decant that time. We spent that summer together, and we had so much fun. It's amazing, you know. It's like at the end of your life, here's the conversation. I hope I wasn't a bad husband. Well, I hope I was an okay wife, you know. How did we do? How did we do? And then I think, I'm so glad. I am so glad that we just kept walking this path together. And all those other things that came and went, we just swatted away and batted away between us, you know?
He had a long battle with his cancer. He's such a brave lad.
What do you miss the most about George?
His humor, his friendship, his love.
I've lost racing drivers. So many of my friends have been killed. I've been with them when they've died. I've had an enormous exposure to emotional experiences. And yet, I don't think there's much else that's ever given me such a long-lasting bereavement as George's loss. And I can't say that I was one of George's very best friends, because a lot more people spent a lot more time with him than I did. But I at least felt such a closeness to him that it still affects me to this day. I could give you a dozen names, and I'll bet you they would say the same as I'm saying. It wasn't a skill. It was just an aura which provided us with a feel-good factor that we didn't get from very many people in our lives.
The last weeks of George's life, he was in Switzerland, and I went to see him, and he was very ill, and he could only lay down. And while he was being ill and I'd come to see him, I was going to Boston because my daughter had a brain tumor. And I said, well, I've got to go. I've got to go to Boston. And he goes, it was the last words I heard him say, actually. And he said, do you want me to come with you? Oh, God. So, that's the incredible side of George. God, it's like Barbara fucking Walters here, isn't it? You know?
There was a profound experience that happened when he left his body. It was visible. Let's just say you wouldn't need to light the room if you were trying to film it. He just lit the room.